running an agency doesn't have to feel like juggling flaming chainsaws. At Schmidt Consulting Group, we help you ditch the chaos, land more clients, and even enjoy running your business again. No fluff, no BS, just strategies that actually work. Check us out at schmidtconsulting.group because your agency deserves better.
Join host Kurt Schmidt as he sits down with Peter Bailey, president of the Prouty Project, to dive into the art and science of leadership, emotional intelligence, and building high-performing teams. Don't miss this insightful conversation.
Peter, how are you today?
I'm great, Kurt. Good to see you.
It's good to see you. So, Peter, you're at the Prouty Project. Can you tell me a little bit about the work that you do there and the people you work with?
Sure. Prouty Project was started, 37 years ago by Jeff Prouty. And he really looked at the integration of leadership and strategy and that sweet spot of how do you help groups work better together. We're a small boutique firm. I'm president there. There's 15 of us. And we really, we had a full day yesterday together and we kind of looked at each other and say, we're pretty lucky. We're pretty lucky we all get to work together. So we love the work we do and we enjoy working with each other. That's awesome.
And is there a type of people you work with? Is there people that you focus on helping on a daily basis?
It's a good question. Probably 5 senior consultants, and we all have our areas of focus and practice, but we work with nonprofits and private sector and help companies with mergers and acquisitions. We do a lot with senior leadership teams, and we also do cohort leadership models. So I wouldn't say it's a full buffet, but we get pretty excited about some of the work, and it all expands into other areas like executive coaching and long-term engagements that stay with accountability reviews and strategic planning that often kicks off the engagement and then ongoing leadership work.
That makes sense. So let me ask you a real basic question because I want to start there. But why does somebody need a leadership coach? Why would they need that? I mean, I think the answer might be obvious to a few, but there's a lot of ways that people try to solve that problem, right? Sometimes they just live in denial, which is, a great place out in Egypt. And then there's lots of books out there, there's courses, there's all sorts of different things. But what's the real reason behind why people need coaching in leadership specifically?
Well, I believe that there's nobody who wakes up and says, oh, I'm going to have a bad day, or, I'm going to be difficult to work with my coworkers. We all show up to our best selves, and yet it doesn't always come off that way. And part of that is, along the way of people's, climbing to higher levels of leadership, we often don't get some of those pieces in our leadership backpack that would support us. So that's an area that we would uncover as we're doing strategic planning, that in a leadership team, there may be 1 or 2 people who seem to not feel comfortable sharing, or their ideas are rejected, or they dominate the conversation and become difficult for people to work around. And that would be an opportunity for us to say, let's work with you one-on-one. And one of our favorite tools is emotional intelligence. A lot of you know that tool, but it really is a 2-box model over a 2-box, a 4x that it helps you see, first self-awareness and then self-management and then other awareness and relationship management. And if people can learn more about themselves, that's the best place to start. But it's not enough. Then they have to do what we call self-management, which is really filtering. Kurt, I'd ask all of your listeners to raise their hands as they're listening to this or driving. How many of you have said something to a coworker, a significant other, or a family member you thought they needed to know and it didn't go well? Usually everybody raises their hand because, we're all guilty of that. Well, self-management helps you realize I need to filter my thought bubbles so that I don't just say everything I think. And the other part in that upper left box of that 4 box is empathy. So if I were coaching you, Kurt, it would be, what does Kurt need here right now? What's his mood? What did he just come from? Your kid was sick at home and now you're rushing late to the office. That's not a good time for me to hit you with some developmental pointers, Oh, that's where empathy comes in. And then truly, if I want to build a partnership with you or with anybody, I need to figure out how do we build that relationship. And that's the 4th box. So we look at EQ as being a really important piece for people to get deeply in their bones, because we see leaders who climb positions And you all on the call have heard this, that they don't have the EQ you wish they had. That would be an opportunity for us to bring that to them. And then we add other powerful tools like insights discovery. That really helps you begin to see the color quadrants people might fall in. Are they introverted thinkers? Are they extroverted feelers? There might be a natural clash there, and there could be adversity experienced. But we like to think of, well, how do we help you see complementary opposites? And that's really where the executive coaching goes to. It's really helping people bring out their best selves and begin to learn a language of how to communicate with others. And most of that is out of self. I think too often we get a little paranoid and fear-based and protecting how much I don't know. And we're seeing more and more successful leaders today being the vulnerable leader, being the, you know what, I don't know, Kurt, can you help me? And that's powerful. And that's where we really help people get there.
Well, you and I are old enough to remember the Jack Welch sort of era of, there's no vulnerability in leadership. You can't show weakness, otherwise you'll get eaten alive. And, it took me a long time to kind of break out of that role over my career in leadership, right? I mean, I always tell the story, my first leadership role, I just thought, well, if I make everybody my best friends, they'll just do whatever I want to have happen. And wow, that was really painful. Like, it was not good at all. It did not work out. They did not want to be my friend, Peter, turns out.
Right.
And that was a big learning curve for me. But, as I know some people can be resistant to these coaching and this sort of stuff, right? Because I mean, again, my experience was you're at an organization and HR gives you Strengths Finders, Myers-Briggs, DISC. You get slapped with, every 18 months I was taking a new kind of test of some kind, and they all told me different things, and some of it, bits and pieces, were helpful. But why have we relied on those types of things for so long and not focus on the one-on-one type of coaching? Is it just basically cost, or is it that people just don't understand the value of it?
Well, it's a great question. And I think, I've been in the field 40 years. It's a little embarrassing to say, but I love the work we do and I don't want to leave it yet. But yep. I think the early days that you're describing, it was more of a shotgun approach of leadership. You all hear what the message is, go do it. And I think we've gotten smarter over the years where it's become much more individualistic. What does Kurt need? What does Peter need? What does a Susan need? What does Amy need? And then how do I, as a leader, modify myself to get better results in those relationships? So it has come down to putting better tools in our leadership backpack so that whether we're doing strategic planning or a senior team onboarding, leadership development, we all need to figure out who are the people who are at the table and how do we best get this group of people working better together.
Yeah, I think because obviously each person is a beautiful and unique snowflake, right, Peter? And they all have special needs. But how many times is it that where you have a leader showing up and saying, because this is something I've seen a lot just in the last few years, is trust has eroded a bit more, it feels like, in leadership. And I don't know if COVID and the work from home stuff had to do with it, if there's been a lot of layoffs the last few years. It seems that trust is at an all-time low in some of these organizations, and leaders might be out there saying, like, let's go this way, and the team might be like, I don't know if that's a good idea. What have you been seeing over the last few years? Has there been changes since COVID, since we've had these massive layoffs and we've had this kind of weird stagnation, inflation sort of stuff going on? What's been the differences you've seen in just the last few years?
Oh my gosh. Well, I'm glad this is a 10-hour podcast because
perfect. Let's do it. Let's go. I got some water. I'm ready.
It's an all-nighter. This is great.
Let's do it, Peter.
You've touched on a lot of points there. I think COVID was such a shakeup for everybody. We had been cruising along, rightly or wrongly, for years, and that was a pattern interrupt. And I think it threw people back into their homes, into various workplace configurations, working remotely, ramping up to communicating only virtually. And anything that wasn't already in place with good character building and team building became a problem. So the fear, the doubt, the lack of trust developed back then. Like, if people were in their homes in their pajamas watching television on a team call, how do we know they're doing their work? And I think that's because we didn't set things up right first time. You all know that forming, storming, norming, performing model. It's been around for 50 years. And if we don't spend time forming, we're going to get to storming at some point. And I think that's where we have almost had to reform who we are in that virtual environment. And a lot of companies came to us and said, can you work with us on accountability? We got to get people to do what they say they're going to do. And to be honest, I like to go the more positive way instead of, rather than working on the pejorative, holding people accountable. What if we said, how do we help increase their commitment? You know? And so that became where we focused as a team development and working in strategic planning to help them build commitment at all levels of the organization so that accountability wasn't an issue. And so people often go towards the problem, but we like to think of, let's go towards the solution. What's a more positive way to fix what you're looking at? And so
I love that.
Yeah.
I love it. Yeah, because early on in my career, one of the first jobs I had, if my butt wasn't in my seat at a certain time, and if it left any sooner than a certain time, that's when I got talked to. But it wasn't really because of my work or the quality of my work. I didn't really get in trouble much for that. It was more like, why were you 15 minutes late? Like, do we need to talk? And I learned very quickly that in the larger corporate setting, like, optics was everything and performance was sort of, okay. You just kind of stay below the radar and don't pop up too much. But then when I was in smaller organizations and startups and things like that, it was, if you're not rowing, it's pretty obvious that we're sinking. And I feel that startup mentality has really started to work its way into lots of other organizations, and they're expecting a certain level of performance now that maybe they hadn't before. Right. But the problem is that they don't. I never got formal leadership training. I had a good boss that just handed me books, like The Giant Within or some crap, like here, read some of this and then go put it to use. And that was kind of my training. And then the rest was just making lots and lots of mistakes for 20 years. So, but I feel like I got good at it because I wanted to get good at it. And I think that's the key question I have for you, Peter. Like, if people are not committed, you use your words, to getting better as a leader, isn't it's like impossible to get there, isn't it?
Well, no. And I think that's one of the things that was revealed in COVID was how effective people were working from home or working remotely. I mean, some people went up to their cabins, some picked a ski house that they went to. And yet in the 6 to 8 hours they were working that day, they were highly effective. And they had a chance to spend more time with family and environments that were more conducive to them and their nature. That was actually a telling piece of information that they didn't have access to. And so now we're trying to reintegrate that as people are saying, no, come back to offices. We've got another trauma situation here where people have adjusted to crisis with COVID, working from home, and now readjusting to these, decrees of now you need to be 4 to 5 days in the office again. Not many people on this call remember the record needle skipping, but that's one of those, where, oh my gosh, I love this 3 days a week from home. And now it's 5 days with a 45-minute commute each way. And so here's where the leadership comes into play. As leaders, we need to help people go through transition. Bill Bridges was known for his work on transitions. And how do we help people transition to homes that they were working remotely and do that well? And now how do we take the time to transition them back into the office? It's not enough to, okay, May 1st, you're back in the office and leave it there. We need to help them recognize, again, going to EQ or insights discovery. And we've in fact done this with leadership teams, help build a plan where everybody has some ownership in the plans coming back to office. Then it will feel more like people are involved appropriately. Quick funny story. We worked with a team that actually said, great, we're going to bring everybody back. And I know they've been working for 18 months alone. Let's bring them back and we'll do a kickball game in the parking lot to invite everybody back.
Yeah.
Well, some people thought that was a great idea. probably 2/3 thought that was the disaster and they didn't sign up for it. And this is where that EQ and insights model really helps you to say, well, if you're an extroverted feeler, absolutely kickball sounds like a blast. But if you were in that blue quadrant of introverted thinker, that's a nightmare. So we actually teams do some sort of multicultural, multicolor-based, committees to say, what would be appropriate ways for insights-based people to come back? Like, introverted thinkers, what are they going to want to do as a time to come back? What would people who are hard charging red energy want to do to come back? And let's build a sort of a process where all four can be, honored.
Yeah, one of the foibles that I had as a leader is listening to a small squeaky set of people that then I looked at as what everybody else was thinking. So it would happen where, a few small squeaky voices that were like, we should do this activity or we should do these things. And why don't we do more of these things? And then I would be like, okay, well, that's what the team wants to do. Let's start, putting that out there. And just like you said, 2/3 of them were like, what? No, like, I don't want any part of this, Right. But I'm like, I'm listening to the people that are like the managers and things, and they don't understand what's going, like, why, okay, what's the disconnect here? Right. Because you, as a leader, also, like, you can't just go around taking consensus all the time for every decision and every move. So how do I thread that needle, Peter?
Yeah. That's a great question. And yeah, I don't want people to think like we have to take surveys. What do people want to do? And
they do, yeah.
We got 100 people all agreeing. No, if I'm filling my leadership backpack with emotional intelligence and insights discovery, and I've been working strategically towards passing ownership onto my team so we get buy-in, I'm going to be a better leader. I will, with a small committee of people, make better decisions with other people in mind. And when we do that, we're going to get less resistance. I think it's behind closed doors that decisions are made that don't get rolled out well. And so if you just spend a little bit of time, and it seems a little bit like expensive to spend some time up front, but if you do that, the long term will be much better rollout.
And so it'll be a lot less expensive in the long term.
Absolutely.
I'll tell you that, all the cleanup.
Yeah, penny wise, pound foolish. And I'll go back to a video we like to share at the Prouty Project by Benjamin Zander, who was the Boston Philharmonic conductor, and perhaps you've seen it. But he talks about how he does leadership in his symphonies is how he can suggest we do leadership in our organizations. One of the things he does is he looks for shining eyes. So if you're a happy employee, Kurt, I'm looking at you, you're engaged, you feel empowered, you've got some work alone time, you've got some work with the team time, you're hitting your targets, you've got the light in your eyes, we're good. And we like to call those cultural spark plugs. I want to build more Kurts. Like, what is Kurt got going? How do I build that? But if I'm looking at you and I don't see shining eyes, then I have to turn the question on me. Not wrong, what's wrong with Kurt, but what am I doing that Kurt's not engaged? And so a really good leader has that type of mentality where it's not looking at people and thinking who gets a pink slip, but really who is not, if they're underperforming, what am I doing that's preventing them from performing better? And so I think that's where leadership has taken a new role. And it takes a little bit of time, but the good leaders are doing it well. We're seeing multiple organizations, nonprofits and large companies, public companies, where people have developed this leadership style of people first. They're connecting with everybody and people are rallying around them and will follow them over a cliff, which is great.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing that I've found is that it's got to be genuine. It's got to be authentic, because I've definitely seen that sort of stuff weaponized. And I don't mean maliciously, but, definitely, I used to have a leader that would, if you weren't getting what was going on, they'd be like, well, I must not be explaining it right. And then would proceed to just tell you what to do or whatever, and
that's code.
Yeah. And it's like, I don't think you think that you're explaining it wrong. I think you think that you're explaining it just fine, and that I am an idiot and not getting it.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's why I wrote in that newsletter for Prouty that just came out, that it's an art and a science of leadership.
Mm-hmm.
There are some specific things we need to do to lead well. It's character, it's vision, it's communication skills, it's engagement, and it's momentum. And then there's the art of it. And so what is it going to take for a Kurt or a Peter to engage? And so I think the best leaders, both the science and the art of that type of a leadership piece.
Yeah. I think the thing that the people that I work with a lot of B2B companies, a lot of agencies, a lot of people that are providing services to clients. And a lot of these companies are started by craftspeople, and they are very good at their craft. And then all of a sudden, a couple of years in, they find that they are in charge of people, and they are no longer a craftsperson. They are now a leader, a boss, a manager, an HR person, a finance, they're a CFO, they're doing all the things. And those folks go through a very troubling transition in a lot of cases, because they assume that the people they're hiring they're coming up alongside of them. But the people that are coming in don't look at as peers. They're like, you're the boss, you tell me what to do. And there can be a real disconnect in the communication and the expectation setting between those folks, that I feel, unless that person is, like you said, they're very open to growing and getting better at this. But I've seen people fight against it, Peter.
Yeah. Well, we're touching a lot of points there. In fact, this book, again, goes back 50 years. Lawrence J. Peters, the Peter Principle, classic model. We get the best salesperson and we elevate them being the sales manager, which was not necessarily their strong suit. They were great at sales. They don't have the leadership backpack for managing other salespeople sometimes. And we also think of them as a high performer, and we don't continue to develop them. We cut them loose and say, great, go forth and prosper. I'll focus on my struggling new people, and that person rots on the vine. And so one of the elements that we need to look at is, how do we continue to develop those people? It goes back to your earlier question of executive coaching. Classic example, you bumped that craft person up who was, head of, supply chain, or was in HR and was a great person one-on-one with the front line. Now they're the director of the department. They need to be vulnerable enough to say, hands up, I don't have enough information. I'd like to be developed to do this job well. And that's where it's great time to bring in fresh horses like the Prouty Project. We're here to help to bring you up to that level and to fill in the pieces you might have missed. Glad you were terrific at sales. Now let's help you look at why you were terrific at sales, you know, and how to help other people do that.
There's 2 points there that I think are really interesting, Peter, because one, I definitely was that person, but I was not, there was no way I was going to say, thanks for the promotion. I don't know what the hell I'm doing. And number two, the idea of being able to pay attention to the people you do promote, because I've seen that before, where you toss people into the front of the bus and then you turn right around and you keep working on the back of the bus trying to get them, up to the front, right? And you just assume those people are fine because they're good at their job and they're hitting their numbers and all the other things. And I think that's a really key point that you made, that you can't lose track of those people, because at this point, especially during that transition period, they're going to need a lot of help. I remember one of my first promotions, not my boss, but one of the other executives. I remember him walking by my desk and was like, congrats on the promotion. Now you got to earn it.
Yeah. Great.
And I was like, yay. Thanks for the vote of freaking confidence, man.
Now I'm terrified.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So who I avoided in the halls after that for about 2 years. But, what I found too is that because there wasn't that much, there was some, but there wasn't as much investment in leadership. I had to go outside of the organization. I couldn't just rely on the organization to provide those resources to me. And so, it did start with things like books and podcasts and YouTube videos and things like that. But then going out and finding mentors and coaches really made all the difference, because again, you want to learn from other people's experience. That's where it's really going to stick, not just from theories and reports and surveys. Right. Those things, again, I think people put a lot too much stock into those as ways to be solutions. To me, it might be ways to identify problems that need solutions, but it's not a cure.
Right. No, I'm with you. And I love books. We turned our dining room into a library. I know you've got that new book that just came out. I've got one that's coming out that I'm excited about. And yet I would agree, I've learned more from other people than I have books. Great to get a model, but now let's put that model into action.
Right.
And I think that, you call out the idea of mentoring, and that's critical. I think people need to be better at, where do I see this going well? Who in the leadership team, even outside my division, and would they help mentor me? And can I be vulnerable enough to say, I love what you're doing. They say, stick with the winners, find some people out there and really invite them to start a partnership with you so that you can become them. I wrote an article not long ago about helping people, roll into new positions. And truly it starts with that person before they leave that position. If you're the senior vice president, Kurt, you can't leave until you build 2 more Kurt Schmidts. And then what's exciting about that is that in your last sunsetting years, you're kind of jazzed about building 2 more people who can replace you. Or it keeps you really motivated in your later years. And one point, just I want to go back to that you said about, well, what do you do when you've been given a new position? Now you got to earn that. A pointer that I discovered with a mentor that was really helpful, he sort of did that pyramid model and said, people who are at the top generally ask the next level down, what do you, what's going on? How's it going? How's it working? And the water doesn't flow up. People, because of power dynamics, won't tell you really what's going on. So this mentor helped me see, by turning the pyramid upside down with you at the bottom, servant leadership model. And then when you ask the level above you, which is the one that's reporting to you, you ask them good questions like, what do you need to do your job well? And then they would roll that water down to you because you want to help do their job well. And then they ask the next level above them, which reports to them, what do you need to do your job well? So truly the leadership model that way becomes an advocacy model. I want to advocate for what people need to do their jobs well, whether it's time off or a new configuration of team or meeting cadence. We can help by leading. And now people are telling you because the water runs downhill. And that was a wonderful paradigm shift for me to see that even in those early days of a new leadership role, if I just change the question rather than, oh, I know what to do in this role, I'm going to ask better questions. What do you need to do your job well? And then I'm going to start getting more information, and then I can advocate for that.
I love it because it's a cliche, but there's a lot of truth behind it, which is the best leaders don't have the best solutions. They have the best questions, right?
Right.
And so to your point, if the better you get at asking questions, the better you're going to get the responses you're actually looking for. Versus, like you said, instead of just saying like, how's it going? If you say, what do you need to be successful today? Putting people into you put them into different mindsets, right? This is the conversation we're having,
So I'm going to do a reverse plug for you and tell everybody to go get your book on networking because you had a great quote from Laura King, who many of you may know. She's amazing here in the Twin Cities. But her quote is, it's not about you at all. It's what you can do for others. Lead with service. So between you and Laura King, you're helping to change the world here, which is great. And, but I mean, it's that kind of thing. It's getting out of self. And if I'm stuck in myself, I'm going to be defended, protected, and I don't want anybody to know that I don't know enough.
Right.
But if I reach out, be vulnerable, find mentors, share leadership, learn more, be in a peer group, there's so much more comes out of that. And going back to another one of your questions, we're seeing more and more of that as people are coming back to offices, as they're trying to make sense of the chaos of the world today. We're seeing more and more of these thought pods, leadership teams forming almost like grassroots leadership teams to help people just have communication. We're hardwired for connection. People are seeking that out. So if you haven't found somebody yet, get a group of people who are like-minded and work together and open-minded and work together and start solving those types of emotional needs of what do I need? Like you said, sometimes I went to work looking for family members. You may not find family there. So go there for your work, but find your group other ways so that you can continually reinforce your own groundedness so you can do your best work.
Yeah, I love it. Well, Peter, I could talk to you all day. I learned so much from every conversation I have from you. I appreciate you taking the time to join me and talk to my audience. So if I want to get in touch with you, if I want to learn more about the Prouty Project, if I want to get more resources, where do I go? Where do I find it?
Absolutely. It's a delight working with you, Kurt. Thanks so much for doing what you do in the community, which is connect, good people to everybody you know. The Prouty Project is here in Eden Prairie, Minnesota. We love connecting with more people. So look for us on the web. Look for me, Peter Bailey, on LinkedIn. I've done a TED Talk on heroic journey mindset, which I think is really critical for this day and age as we try to figure out how do we slay dragons and fear and doubt as we go forward. But, we're here, we're accessible, and we believe in abundance. So we're happy to partner with folks. So please reach out. Delighted. And Kurt, thank you again for honoring us with some time on your important podcast.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you, Peter. All right. We'll talk to you again soon. Okay.
Take good care. Bye for now.
All right.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the show, we'd love it if you left a review on iTunes or Spotify. It makes a big difference. And be sure to check out schmidtconsulting.group for more ideas and insights. Remember, every big dream starts with a single step. Keep moving forward, stay curious, and don't forget, we're rooting for you. See you next time.